innovation. It's the ability to see opportunity in places others do not and turn that vision into profitable reality. You can't depend on the managers who are leading the businesses that are responsible for delivering monthly and quarterly profits. They're not going to want to lead a disruptive innovation because those kind of innovations take years to turn into profits. They're not going to want to spend a bunch of time on something that's not going to return value for a couple of years.
Everyone expects you to have all the answers, but who's asking you how you're doing? Who's helping you think through your challenges? Engineer Your Success Insiders is my private podcast designed specifically for you. It's like having a coach in your corner focused on helping you win at work and at home. One story, one insight, one action that you can take, all wrapped up into real coaching insights that you can use. Join at engineeryoursuccessnow.com/insiders.
Success isn't just about what you achieve. It's about living a life that reflects your values and priorities. Welcome to Engineer Your Success, the podcast that helps you lead with intention and live fulfilled.
Welcome to the Engineer Your Success podcast. My name is Dr. James Bryant, your host. Today's guest is Steve Hinch, an executive consultant, former tech executive, and author of Winning Through Innovation. Over his career at Hewlett-Packard, Agilent Technologies, and TeamLogic IT, Steve has led innovation efforts that generated more than $1 billion in new revenue. So whether you are early in your career or leading at the executive level, one thing's clear: having a great ideal isn't the same thing as launching it and making that ideal stick. So in this episode, we're going to explore what separates the managers and organizations that drive meaningful innovation from those that stall out. Stephen, in your experience, what's the difference between having an ideal and actually launching it?
Thanks, James, and thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here. So let's talk about the difference between having that idea and actually turning it into something valuable, which is, it's the two parts of it together that is what I define as innovation. And here's my definition of innovation. It's the ability to see opportunity in places others do not and turn that vision into profitable reality. Lots of people have good ideas, but in business, good ideas by themselves aren't very useful if you can't figure out how to turn them into something valuable to the company. Let's talk about the second part of that. How do you come up with innovative ideas? Once you've got that innovative idea, what does it take to turn that into something profitable? And there are a lot of pieces to that puzzle. And part of it depends on what kind of innovation you are doing. And I'm going to talk right now about two major different types of innovation. The first is what I will call incremental innovation, and the second is what I call disruptive innovation. Because the way you manage those two types of innovations are different. Now, incremental innovation is where you're already selling products to existing customers and you make improvements. For example, in the automobile industry, cars today sell to the same people who bought them 10 years ago, but they're not the same cars. They have improvements, things like anti-lock brakes, improved driver safety. The warranty periods for today's cars are longer, but they're still cars people know and are comfortable buying. Disruptive innovation is where you're doing something entirely new that people have never dealt with before. And let me give you just one example. The first iPad that Apple introduced back in 2010 really changed the landscape because a whole class of customers realized they didn't need to have laptop computers anymore. They could do everything they wanted on their tablet. That affected companies like HP, Dell, and Lenovo. But it went well beyond that because those same people realized, I don't need to buy printed newspapers anymore. I can read everything that I want for the news on my tablet. And that certainly had impact on the printing or the publishing industry. Imagine if you were the owner or the CEO of a company that made printing presses for the publishing industry. Your business is gone, and there's no way that that's ever going to come back. So that's an example of a disruptive innovation that has really impacted the whole market in recent years. So the question is, how do you turn that great idea into something profitable? Let's talk about how to do it for disruptive innovations, because those are the grand ideas that are going to completely change marketplaces. In the corporate world, you can't depend on the managers who are leading the businesses that are responsible for delivering monthly and quarterly profits every month and every quarter. They're not going to want to lead a disruptive innovation because those kind of innovations take years to turn around and actually turn into profits. And if they're being measured on how well they're doing this month or this quarter, they're not going to want to spend a bunch of time on something that's not going to return value for a couple of years. The way to deal with disruptive innovation is to set up a separate organization for it. That's the first thing that you need to do. Second thing you need to do is you need to figure out all the other things that have to go on in order for that disruptive innovation to be successful. It's not just a good idea. You've got to figure out, is there really a market for this? Do I have the technology that is necessary to deliver it? What's the competition going to do? That's something I actually had to deal with once. There was this other company that was the market leader. They had like 75% market share. We had 25%. Managers at HP thought, well, the only way to deal with this is to shut the product line down. But I talked those managers into transferring that product to me, and we went after a new market opportunity. Since we weren't market leaders, we had to figure out what customers really need and how do we make sure that as we're asking those customers, they're not telling our competition that of what we're doing. And so that's a challenge, because if the leading found out, they would go off and invent their own product. And since they were already the leaders, they would stay the leaders. So what we did is we invented what I will call a phantom product. It was not a very good product. It was something that at least we could go out and show the customers, what do you think of this? And they would say, it's better than nothing, but I'm not sure it's something I would want to buy. And but we'd find out what their needs were. Meanwhile, the word would get back to our major competitor about this phantom product, and they would say, that's nothing to worry about. I don't have to do anything. It took us 2 years to introduce the product we really wanted. But when we did, our competition was blown away. That's what switched us from 25% market share to over 75% market share. And it took them 6 years to respond. So that's the kind of thing that you don't necessarily think of in, I've got this innovative idea, but there's much more to it than just launching that new idea. You've got to look at all the other pieces to deliver it successfully.
So a few things that you've mentioned. One is to be able to set that team or that product up for success, that you want to have the person in that team that's managing that product not to be responsible for day-to-day delivery, just so they're focused on how can they move that innovation forward. So what are some other best practices for an organization trying to move forward with innovation?
So for disruptive innovation side of things, you first of all got to staff that project with only the few key people that are really excited about working on it. If you are a manager and you say, you need a mechanical engineer on this disruptive project, and so you move a mechanical engineer who doesn't want to be there, he's not excited about that product, that's not going to work. Just staff a project with just the few key people it really takes to be successful. So that's one thing. Second thing is you need to understand that first product that you launch can't be everything for everybody. So you may be going after a market that's fairly large. It's got different segments of the market. You can't cover all of those at once. I've been a big fan of the minimum viable product. Your first product needs to satisfy a few customers in a certain area, but it doesn't need to satisfy everyone. Once you launch that product, you get feedback and money that helps fund the development of follow-on products.
So we've talked about disruptive innovation. Let's spend some time digging into incremental innovation.
Mm-hmm. Incremental innovation is making improvements to products you're already selling. That's the kind of thing that the people who are managing that business really should be doing, because that's the kind of thing that will continue to keep them successful over the next coming months and maybe up to a year from now. They know that if they're not making improvements to their product, their competition probably is, and they will quickly go obsolete if they don't do that. So incremental innovation should be staffed and funded by the businesses that benefit immediately from it. There's a couple of things about incremental innovation that are different than disruptive innovation. Anybody in the company can do incremental innovation. You don't have to be just, one of these super smart individuals off in an ivory tower somewhere. A lot of the great incremental innovation ideas come from people on the factory floor or first level supervisors that see what's going on every day. And they can say, if we just changed this part of the process, we could make 3 times more products to make them feel like they can make those contributions. They need to know that it's okay to be innovative and their ideas will be supported.
What role does failure play in implementing an innovation?
According to our studies, roughly 80% of startup companies fail. The venture capital industry knows that's going to happen, but they don't mind funding those 80% that fail because they know that 20% that are successful will more than offset the 80% that fail. The other thing about that is that the people on the 20% that are successful probably started out in one of those 80% that didn't become successful, and they learned what you needed to change in order to be successful. The problem for large companies is that managers expect every innovative idea you have better work out or your career is going to be damaged. So that's a roadblock that large companies have got to get over. Not every innovative idea is going to be successful. Use that as a learning experience and figure out why. Some innovative ideas aren't successful because the market wasn't there, or we don't have the technology. We didn't know that when we started out. That was the whole reason that we were doing this innovative ideas, to discover whether it really had an opportunity. Other failures are going to be because the leadership team really screwed up. They didn't give the team the resources they need. They didn't manage the process properly. Those can be learning experiences, but different kinds. In that case, you need to talk to the team so they understand what they didn't do right and not make those mistakes again.
When you're talking about disruptive innovation, it's easier to see where the different pieces may fit because you're treating it as something that is separate. You're extracting the day-to-day delivery of a product or a program so people can focus on delivering that result or developing that particular product or that innovation. I think that a lot of listeners are probably in situations where they're looking at incremental innovation. And these are innovations that they can use to improve productivity or impact the bottom line in terms of generating revenue. And so when you're in that particular situation, what are some of the mindset shifts that you would recommend for managers or people that are taking on incremental innovation?
The first thing is that the managers of the business that is going to be improved, hopefully improved by the innovative idea, have to be supportive of the team that is coming up with the innovative idea. If, for example, if a person on the production floor has this innovative idea for how to improve the process, and they go over to the manager or they go over to the engineers supporting that product line and tell them, here's my thoughts on what we could do better. If the response is, look, you worry about building the product, we'll worry about innovation, that's going to kill any enthusiasm to do innovation at the lower levels. So you've got to support that, and you've got to recognize that not every innovative idea is good. But here are some things that the leadership team can do to improve their chances. One is make sure that everybody in the organization knows what this company is all about, what our primary focus is, what's important to the senior leaders in the company, so that the people that are doing the innovations can focus on the kind of innovation that will be useful to the company and not something way off in left field that nobody is going to care about. Make sure that everybody knows what the company is about. Second, I gave people the idea of spending 2 hours per week on innovative ideas. But that also means that if they come up with an innovative idea, you've got to give them the ability to try it out. That means they might need some money to invest in prototypes. They need space to do the work. And you've got to be willing to give them that capability. So, and then finally, we get back to the idea of success versus failure. You've got to be able to consider rewarding both success and failures, constructive failures.
You keep hitting the same walls with your team, your workload, your life.
You know what they say about insanity? Doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results?
Are you ready to break the cycle? Engineer Your Success. Insiders is Dr. James Bryant's private podcast. It's like having a coach in your corner focused on helping you win at work and home.
One story, one insight, one action to help you focus on what matters most.
Join at engineeryoursuccessnow.com/insiders.
Stephen, we've talked about how to implement innovation, both disruptive and incremental. Can you tell us about your journey in not just the innovations that you've implemented, but the different places in which you've been able to do that?
Sure. So I have always known from when I was in high school that I was going to have a technical career. And so I devoted all my attention to what did it take to do that. I went to a college in Southern California, Harvey Mudd College, got both a bachelor's and a master's degree in engineering, and immediately started work at Hewlett-Packard as a production engineer. The production engineer we don't invent brand new products. We work with products that are already being manufactured and work with the people that are manufacturing them to fix problems that come up when something changes. I spent the first 10 years of my career either in an engineering role or managing production engineers, dealing with problems on production lines and fixing them. Then I moved into R&D at Hewlett-Packard again. And what I found is that because I had spent so many years dealing with problems that were caused because engineers in R&D hadn't figured out all of the potential problems, I think that made me a better R&D engineer and better R&D engineering manager, because I knew, if we don't fix this problem in R&D now, production is going to have it a year or two from now. So let's get the design right from the beginning. And I spent another 10 years in R&D, mostly in R&D management. I wasn't an R&D engineer for very long. And then I had an opportunity to move into marketing. And I had never spent a minute in marketing before. I'd worked with marketing engineers when I was in R&D. We had to figure out how marketing was going to sell the product I was inventing. But that was about the extent of what I knew about R&D, of marketing. And my manager told me, Steve, I know you want to eventually become a general manager and lead an entire business. If you want to do that, you're going to have to learn marketing. And so I'm going to move you into the only position you're qualified for in marketing, which is to lead the entire marketing department for a $300 million a year business. Everybody in marketing thought, what in the world? How could somebody in R&D come in and suddenly lead a $300 million a year business?
So what was the thought process behind that? Because I'm sure you talked to them afterwards and found out, what were they actually thinking when they put you in that role?
Yeah. And I have to say, again, it was not a role that I was looking for. My boss came to me and said, Steve, we think you're the right person to lead this business. And I had been working with him for so long, and I had been working with the product marketing team. They knew I had a close working relationship with the marketing side of the business that I was leading in R&D. And that's unusual back then anyway. It was unusual for R&D and marketing teams at Hewlett-Packard to have that kind of close relationship. It was sort of the norm was R&D felt like they invented the products. It was marketing's job to figure out how to sell them, but it was not marketing's job to help figure out what the right product was. And I had taken a completely different perspective. Is I felt I needed marketing's help. They were the ones talking to customers all the time. They could help shape the right product, and it had been very successful. Again, that's part of how I was able to achieve $1 billion in new revenue for the company in 3 years. I was in charge of this large organization that included product marketing, product support, Marcom, and customer support, things I'd never thought of before. I knew I was not going to be the expert. I wanted them to tell me what was important and how I could help. And one of the key things that I was able to do is serve as a buffer between marketing that were doing the work and the upper management that was always trying to figure out, why aren't you getting more revenue, or when are you going to launch this new product? So I was the interface to block upper management from distracting the marketing teams. I also learned how to go out and talk to customers, sell customers on our new product introductions, and get them excited. But that was not something I knew about in marketing from the beginning. I was willing to learn.
It sounds like you were already integrating some of that market research when you were leading marketing on the R&D side.
On the R&D side, yes.
Before you moved over, you were talking to marketing folks, or trying to understand, or talking to people designing products, or understand the problems. What are the things that we need to solve when we're doing this research and development?
That's exactly right. And I think one of the reasons my general manager decided I was right for this job is because the other candidates, they spent their entire careers in marketing. They didn't know R&D. A lot of them had never worked with R&D before. They didn't know manufacturing. And so they would have come to the marketing manager's job with a limited perspective. My boss thought I could bring a broader perspective and guide the marketing people, help them to learn about what they needed to do to interface with R&D more effectively, and what they needed to do to interface with manufacturing more effectively. And that turned out to be successful enough that I eventually became the general manager of that whole business.
Oh, wow. So you became the general manager. And then what was next for you?
That's interesting, because my vision was I would like to be the CEO of an entire company. I knew I was never going to be the CEO of HP so I would have to figure out something else to do. This was during the Great Recession, about 2009, where Technologies was giving people incentive to leave because the business had really declined. I had the opportunity to take a healthy early retirement severance package. And so I did that and decided that now was the time to try to do what I could to start my own company. But, I was at the age where I didn't want to spend 10 years growing this company from scratch and trying to figure out everything about how to run a small company, because running a small company is a lot different than being a general manager in a multinational corporation. I explored different opportunities, got some career coaching from somebody, decided that the right thing for me to do was to buy a franchise of a national corporation. I'd never really thought about franchising before. I thought about, I don't want to have a fast food franchise, but there are different franchises. And the one I signed up for is TeamLogic. I bought the franchise for the Santa Rosa area, started that from scratch. And what we did is we provide IT support for small and mid-sized businesses that don't have their own IT. And that's a really big, important service. And it's getting even more important as cybersecurity becomes more of an issue. You need experts to manage IT so you're not getting hacked. I ran my franchise for 6 years, grew it to be one of the top few in the company before I sold it and decided I wanted to move into consulting. It was time in my life where I just needed to step back.
You've talked about being a general manager in a multinational company to now buying this franchise. What was your biggest shift or transition that you had to make?
Yeah, it's a lot different to manage a small business where I only had, at most I had 12 people working for me. And I started with one besides me. In a large multinational corporation, a general manager like me would have a whole army of people that I could delegate things to. I didn't have to do a lot of that stuff myself. In a small company, you don't have that option. You've got to be ready to roll up your sleeves and do whatever it takes, whether that's fixing a problem at a client, doing the sales job myself, or dealing with an internal issue on personnel. I didn't have people to help with that. And I firmly believe that a good portion of the managers that are really successful in a multinational corporation would never be able to be as successful in a small company because they don't know how to deal with that. That was the biggest challenge I had, and I had to learn it on the fly, but I sort of knew, because I bought a franchise, I went through a week-long training where the franchise headquarters told me, this is what to expect. And that really helped. They gave me all sorts of good advice and coaching, and tools were in place. If I had to set this company up by myself without that kind of help, I probably would never have been as successful as I was. So I'm not trying to sell people on the idea of you should look into franchising, but I'm just telling you that you don't have to start your own company completely from scratch. There are ways to get help.
So I can imagine, though, being in the IT business, IT never stops. People always have issues that need to be addressed. How was it operating in that 24/7 environment?
It's very stressful at times, and I figured out ways to get around it. But so one of the companies that I supported was a company that dispatched air ambulance helicopters throughout the Western United States. And if you think about the air ambulance helicopter service, a lot of the support that they need, they're flying helicopters in the middle of the night because somebody's crashed their car somewhere far away and they need to get a emergency helicopter out to them. And I remember, like, within the first week of when I started supporting them, I got a phone call from the night manager at that company, because he knew my cell phone number and I kept it next to me. He said, our network is down. We've got helicopters in the air and we can't talk to them. Now, this was a Saturday night, and I can't just tell them, okay, I'll get right on that first thing Monday morning when I get in. I got to get that taken care of right now. And so for a couple of years, I had my cell phone next to me at my bed, and it didn't ring every day, but it might ring once or twice a week in the middle of the night, because they weren't the only customer that needed support in the middle of the night. To the point where my wife was ready to strangle me if it rang one more time. And I eventually figured out a way that we rotated the phone between the various technicians so that one technician would have it for 1 week, and then that would move to the next technician, and I would pay them extra. Just for having the phone there, you get an extra, I don't remember now, $100 a week. And if you have to deal with something, you get night pay for whatever you have to deal with. And a lot of the technicians were happy because they needed the extra money.
Yeah.
And I needed the sleep. So that worked out well.
So, but before you came up with that solution, what impact did that have on your quality of life?
It had a pretty big impact on the quality of life. Because I wasn't getting, even if the phone wasn't ringing, I was always thinking, is it going to ring? And I would wake up in the middle of the night. It would be hard to get back to sleep. So it was important to me to get, and to my wife, who was also being waked up by this, I needed to figure out a way out of that before I went crazy. And I do have to say that it was successful. But even then, there was once or twice where I would get a phone call in the middle of the night. Hey, the technician that's supposed to be picking up the phone isn't answering it. And one time I had to go pound on the technician's door at 2:00 in the morning to wake him up and say, hey, we got a problem with one of these clients you got to get taken care of. But that was pretty rare. And it certainly helped my quality of life once I established that kind of responsibility list.
So would you say that you were committed to your work or consumed by your work?
I would not say I was consumed by my work. I always tried to keep a personal life, and that was separate from my business life. But it was a very intense responsibility, and I felt it was important to me to make sure that my clients were satisfied, not only just because if they weren't satisfied, they were going to fire me, but because it was important to me to make sure that I was doing the job that I had told them I was going to do. And so that did make it stressful, but it wasn't totally consuming of my life. I took vacations occasionally. I had a lead technician that I told, I'm going to be gone for a week. Your job is to take care of everything that goes on. If it's a real urgency, call me and I'll talk you through it. But I don't want to be bothered while I'm on vacation unless it is really a desperate situation. And he understood that and it worked well.
No, that's great. So I'm starting to ask a question of the guests. And actually, I think you're going to be the first one of this. I talk a lot about designing a life where you can win at work and at home. Mm-hmm. And so the question that I have for you, because I think this is kind of at the heart of the show and the community that we're building, is what does it mean to you to win at work and at home?
Let's talk about the win at work first. To me, I feel like I'm winning if I am able to satisfy the customers that I'm there to serve, and that I am able to satisfy the team that I am leading, that they feel like I'm doing the right things to support them. I really get a lot of good things out of that. And it's really exciting to me to see people that I have been coaching turn into great leaders themselves. And I've got, that lead technician that I talked about at TeamLogic IT eventually left TeamLogic IT and started his own company, which has turned into a two-digit $1 million a year business that has been very successful. He uses me as a consultant occasionally, but I don't invest in his business at all. But it has been really exciting to me to see him grow his business, which he probably would not have been able to do, and he admits this, if he hadn't worked for me for a while to learn how to do it. Yeah. That's the kind of thing that really makes me successful at work. On the personal side, I have a whole separate part of my life that I really try to keep separate from work, and that is I love the outdoors, and I try to get out to remote regions of the country as often as I can, maybe once or twice a year, to the point where I've actually written books about the outdoors. So I really try to have success beyond work with my personal life in ways that are really important to me. And my family has been very supportive of that. They come along with me sometimes, and just they think it's great that that's what I like to do, and I actually do it.
Okay. And for someone that's listening, what advice would you give to someone who may be struggling with winning at work and at home?
So you've got to set priorities, and you got to, if you're, let's start by, if you're struggling at work, why is it? Is it because you don't understand the job? Is it because you're doing actually a good job, but you wish you could do even more? But you've got to set those priorities, because you only have a certain amount of hours per day that you should be committing to work. And, 8 hours should be, and maybe 10. That's what I used to do. I committed to 10 hours per day at work, but no more than that. So do what you can within the framework of the boundaries that you need to set for yourself, and then really make sure that you understand what are the priorities that I really need to be delivering. Focus on those and not the 20 other things that people want me to do, but they're not as important. On the personal side, you really need to, not everybody is going to have a family, but you need to establish who are the important people in your personal life and work closely with them and do the things that you enjoy doing with them, and give yourself the time to do that. So that's sort of my thoughts on both sides of things there.
Okay. So Steve, I've really enjoyed this conversation. If someone wants to follow up with you, what's the best way for them to get in contact with you?
So I have a website. It's www.stephen, STEPHEN, Hinch, HINCH.com. And that's a good way to get a hold of me. I also have a LinkedIn site. You can search for me on LinkedIn and contact me that way. I'm happy to anybody that wants to connect with me. If you've been listening to this podcast, you're the kind of person that I would like to connect with.
And we'll include links to your website and your LinkedIn profile in the show notes. So before we wrap up, I'm going to give you the opportunity to ask one question for me.
I do. We've talked a whole lot about me. I want to find out a little bit more about you. So I see you as a successful podcaster. I don't know about everything else you do in your life, but how does being a successful podcaster help you achieve what you want to get out of life?
That's a great question. I would say is that my definition of success evolves as I evolve. So in the beginning, the podcast was a way for me to share my voice, my ideals, my values, so that people could really get to know me and hear kind of more about my philosophies and how I could help them. It's transitioned now more to a place where I can bring great guests on to make a greater contribution to the engineering community, technical leader community. It helps me, one, by being able to give back to the community, being able to make those connections. But it also introduces people to different concepts that I may have, different ideals of what I may have. I think the biggest thing for me is highlighting other people and giving back. And there are spaces, there may be solo episodes where I am showing up as that voice of authority, but it plays a top of funnel role for me from a marketing perspective and communication perspective. This is how many people get to know me. And in the sales process, people buy from people that they know, like, and trust. Well, if they had been seeing me and hearing me for almost 4 years now that we've been doing the podcast, they know me. My presence is online. If you search Engineer Your Success, you will see, at least on the top quarter of the page, I'm there somewhere. So they know that I am legitimate, and it makes having introductory conversations much easier by having that established presence out there.
Great. Thank you. And you're doing a great service for the engineering community here with this podcast, I think.
Okay. All right, Stephen, thank you. I am going to end this podcast like I end every podcast episode, and that's this. Many people know what to do. Fewer people know how to do it. And there's a select group of people that actually follow through, do it, and are living the life of their dreams, helping others to do the same. Stephen, I want to thank you for being part of that select few.
Thank you.